All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going deep on something pretty fascinating, learned helplessness, and specifically how it impacts, like, autistic students.
Hmm.
Our main source, it's Breaking the Cycle of Learned Helplessness in Autistic Students. That's by Dr. Jaime Hoerricks.
Oh,
Really
interesting.
gets you thinking. By the end, you'll not only understand how deeply this affects these students, but also, what educators can actually do about it.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because we often think of helplessness as just like lacking ability,
Right.
but it's really more this feeling of no matter how hard I try, I'm gonna fail, you know?
Yeah.
So imagine hitting that wall constantly, especially when you're trying to learn in school.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about not having the skills, it's about that motivation to even try just kind of disappearing.
Right.
And Dr. Horitz makes this point that this feeling is often like super amplified for autistic students because of some really specific challenges they face.
Yeah.
Can you kind of break those down a bit?
For sure. Think about executive dysfunction, right?
Right.
So, difficulty with planning, organization, even just starting a task.
Right.
Then on top of that, you add sensitivities, things like, fluorescent lights or even just certain textures can be just completely overwhelming.
It's like they're trying to learn but running an obstacle course, of
Yeah,
their senses at the same time.
exactly.
And no wonder it can feel like impossible sometimes.
Right. And then you add in the social aspect.
Mm.
Autistic students, they face higher rates of bullying and isolation.
Yeah.
And combine that with, the lack of educational support that's really tailored to their needs. And it's no wonder they feel like they're always coming up short.
Dr. Horrocks brings it to life with this student, Jacob. It's a fictional student, but he embodies a lot of these struggles.
Yeah.
She describes him sitting in class, not doing his work, not even responding to help.
Ah.
And on the surface, it looks like, oh, he's defiant or he's lazy. But, there's so much more going on, right?
Right. And it's so easy to jump to those conclusions. But what's interesting is Jacob's behavior is, it's a classic learned helplessness.
Mm.
And you have to think about his history.
Mhm.
Maybe he's had repeated academic failures, or maybe he's been reprimanded for not meeting expectations that, he didn't even understand in the first place.
Oh, yeah.
So instead of seeing it as like him choosing not to participate, it's more like he's learned that participating just doesn't get him anywhere.
Yeah, it makes you totally rethink what's actually going on in the classroom. So knowing this, what can educators do? Like, how do you break this cycle? Because, we're not just here to understand the problem. We want solutions.
Absolutely. The foundation is building trust and understanding. And that starts with observation.
Mm. Mhm.
Educators need to, notice those nonverbal cues, recognize when a student's withdrawing, and then initiate those conversations, privately with low pressure.
So like a teacher saying, hey, I've noticed you've been having a tough time. What can I do to help?
Yeah.
Just that acknowledgement can be huge.
It really can.
Yeah.
It's validating their experience, right?
Yeah.
Making them feel seen and heard, letting them know they're not alone in this. And then you can start to focus on making the work feel achievable.
Hmm. What would that look like, in an actual classroom setting?
One effective approach is breaking down tasks into micro steps.
Okay.
So instead of complete this whole worksheet, maybe it's, let's just circle one word on this page that you understand.
Oh, I see. So celebrating those tiny wins, focusing on the effort, not just the end result.
Yeah, and the language we use matters too.
Right.
Instead of, you got this wrong, try.
Yeah.
I see how hard you're trying. And that effort is what matters most.
Wow, that's a powerful shift in how we talk about it. Takes the pressure off being perfect and puts the focus on the process. I'm thinking choice plays a big role here too, right?
Here.
Giving students that sense of they have some say in things.
Absolutely, yeah. Increasing autonomy and control, it can make a world of difference. So let students choose how they want to present their work, offer alternative assessments, things like that, to reduce test anxiety. Anything that gives them a little more control over how they're learning.
It makes me think about how we can reframe mistakes as part of the learning process. Like instead of, you didn't get this right, a teacher could say, this is tricky, but that means your brain is working hard.
Love that example. And don't underestimate the power of role models. Introducing students to successful people who've overcome similar challenges. Seeing someone else succeed, that can really spark hope that it's possible for them too.
It's all about changing that story from one of defeat to one of possibility.
Yes.
So we've talked about creating that supportive classroom,
Right.
but what about the bigger picture? Dr. Hoerricks argues that learned helplessness isn't just an individual problem, it's a systemic one.
Yeah, and that's a really important point.
So how so?
Well, think about how traditional education often prioritizes, like compliance, standardized testing, over, truly individualized learning,
Yeah.
really understanding things deeply.
Yeah, I can see how that rigid, one-size-fits-all approach could, without meaning to, create learned helplessness, especially for students who don't fit neatly into that mold.
Exactly. If a
Yeah.
student's constantly being told, you're not measuring up, you're not meeting these arbitrary benchmarks,
Right.
it's no wonder they start to feel like, well, why even bother?
That's pretty disheartening. So what's the answer? Like, can individual educators really take on a whole system?
I think they absolutely can. And
Yeah.
that's where being an advocate for your students really comes in.
Yeah.
We can choose to shift from punishment to empowerment.
Shift from punishment to empowerment. That's powerful. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, it starts with acknowledging that disengagement is a learned response, not a character flaw. So instead of punishing a student for not participating, we need to figure out the reasons why they're not.
So it's about digging deeper, asking why, instead of just reacting to what, right?
Exactly. And then we can start building learning environments that truly value each student's strengths and challenges, their individuality.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. We've explored learned helplessness, the specific hurdles autistic students face, and some real strategies for educators to make a difference.
It's a lot to unpack, for sure.
Yeah.
And this is where Dr. Hoerricks takes it even further. She suggests that this whole thing, it's not just an education issue. It reflects a broader societal problem.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm curious now. How so?
Well, she argues that, in a capitalist society, education, it often ends up perpetuating inequality. It prepares some for success, but then, maybe unintentionally, maybe not, it conditions others for a life with, fewer opportunities.
That's a big statement. I can kind of see where she's coming from, though.
Yeah.
If the system only rewards a certain type of learner, a certain way of thinking, then, some students are going to get left behind, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And often, those left behind are the ones already facing, those systemic barriers. Students from marginalized communities, students with disabilities, students who don't fit that, dominant definition of success.
So it's like learned helplessness becomes this tool,
Right.
to keep the power structures the way they are. The ones in power, they stay there. And the ones without, well, they stay powerless.
Yeah.
That's a pretty disturbing thought.
It is. Dr. Hoerricks is definitely making us think here.
Yeah.
But I think these are conversations we need to have.
Yeah.
We need to at least acknowledge these ways that our systems can, even if they don't mean to, keep things unequal.
Yeah. It's uncomfortable, but necessary, right?
Yeah.
If we want to actually make a difference. So what can we do? Where do we even start with something this big?
I think it starts with awareness, understanding the forces at play here, the big picture stuff.
Okay.
And then it's about making conscious choices, in the areas where we do have some control, our classrooms, our schools, our communities.
So as educators, we can push for systems that are more fair, challenge the status quo, create those spaces where difference is valued and every student is truly supported to reach their potential,
Yeah, exactly. It's not easy, but it's the essential work if we want to break these cycles.
I'm a little overwhelmed, if I'm honest. It can feel really daunting to think about tackling these huge systemic issues, especially when you feel like just one person,
I get it. It's a lot. But it can also be empowering to realize that we do have the power to change things, even in small ways.
That's true. Even small changes can create a ripple effect, right?
Exactly.
So let's focus on what we can control. Let's be the change we want to see.
I love that. Be the change.
Yeah.
Simple, but so meaningful.
And speaking of change, Dr. Hoerricks, she ends her article with this really powerful call to action. She says educators don't have to just go along with the system that creates this learned helplessness.
We have a choice.
We can choose to resist that urge to punish, to blame, to write students off.
We can choose to empower them, support them, believe in their ability to learn and grow.
This is really inspiring. This whole conversation has really been eye-opening for me. But I gotta say, I'm still grappling with some things. If learned helplessness is so baked into the system, how do we even start to unravel it?
That's a great question, and it deserves, some real unpacking. I think the first step is recognizing those, like those subtle ways it shows up.
Okay.
For example, think about how we praise students.
Mm.
Do we focus on their effort, their progress? Or are we, without even realizing it, are we reinforcing the idea that only certain outcomes are valuable?
You're right. It's subtle but powerful. It's like we're saying you're only worth something if you achieve this specific result instead of focusing on the effort and all the learning they're doing.
Exactly. And that's just one example.
Yeah.
Think about the way we talk about mistakes. Do we frame them as, chances to learn and grow? Or are we accidentally making them feel ashamed for not getting it right the first time?
It makes me think about how much we emphasize speed and competition in learning. It's like who gets the answer first? Who finishes the test fastest? Who gets the highest score?
You're hitting on something important there. That kind of environment, it can be so anxiety-inducing for students who, learn at a different pace or who need a little more time to process information.
Right.
It makes them feel like they're constantly falling behind, like they're just not good enough.
And that feeling of not good enough, that can be so damaging to their self-esteem, their belief in themselves.
It is.
It's like we're teaching them that their worth is all about how they perform, not, their value as a human being.
That's a really powerful insight. It highlights how these seemingly small, subtle messages, they can have a huge impact on a student's sense of self and their willingness to even engage with learning.
So what can educators do to push back against those messages and create a better environment, a more supportive one? Dr. Hoerricks gives some great strategies,
Yeah.
but I'm curious about your perspective too.
One thing that I found really valuable is explicitly teaching students about growth mindset.
Okay.
The idea that their abilities aren't fixed, that they can learn and grow through effort and, perseverance.
I love that. Shifting the focus from talent, like it's this inherent thing, to the power of hard work. Like teaching them that intelligence isn't limited, it's something you can develop over time.
Exactly. And it's not just about telling them this. It's about showing them we need to be modeling this growth mindset ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Be open about our own mistakes and struggles, celebrate the effort and progress we see in our students.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk, right? Creating a culture where mistakes are seen as opportunities to learn, where effort is valued, and where every student feels like they can take risks and face those challenges.
I couldn't agree more. And it's also about being careful with the language we use. So instead of praising students for being smart or talented, let's focus on their effort, their perseverance, their strategies, their creativity.
Right, shift the focus from qualities they're born with to the actions and choices they're making. And be specific with our praise. Instead of just good job, tell them what they did well and why it worked.
Yes, that kind of feedback means so much more to students. It helps them understand what they're doing well and how they can keep growing and getting better.
And it helps them develop that confidence in their own ability to succeed, right?
Absolutely.
It's about empowering them to be their own advocates, their own champions.
You're absolutely right. And that's really what we want for all our students, isn't it? To help them develop those skills, the confidence, the resilience to navigate the challenges they're going to face in life.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's about giving them not just knowledge, but the tools and that mindset they need to thrive in the classroom and beyond. But, I think there's another piece of this puzzle we haven't really talked about. Collaboration and community.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Hmm.
We can't forget about the power of connection, of belonging, especially for students who might be feeling isolated or, like they're on the outside.
Exactly. Building that sense of community in the classroom, it can be such a powerful way to combat learned helplessness. When students feel supported by their classmates, by their teachers, when they feel like they belong, they're more likely to take risks, try new things, and keep going when things get tough.
Absolutely. And it's not just about creating a warm and fuzzy feeling. It's about real collaboration where students learn from each other, support each other, and celebrate each other's successes.
I can picture a classroom where they're working together on projects, sharing ideas, giving feedback, helping each other through those roadblocks. That kind of collaborative learning, it's so empowering.
I agree. It lets students see that they're not the only ones struggling, that everyone makes mistakes, that learning is something we do together, and it helps them develop those social and emotional skills that are so important for life.
It reminds me how important it is to actually teach those social emotional skills, like communication, empathy, resolving conflicts, working as a team. Those aren't just soft skills, they're crucial life skills that help students build relationships, deal with difficult situations, and stand up for themselves effectively.
Absolutely. And when students feel confident in their ability to connect with others and navigate social situations, they're less likely to fall into those patterns of like isolation and withdrawal that can lead to learned helplessness.
So it's about creating this whole learning environment,
Yeah,
that addresses not just academics, but their social, emotional, and psychological well-being too.
exactly. We need to create spaces where students feel safe, supported, and empowered to take risks, make mistakes, and grow, where they can develop a strong sense of self, a belief in themselves, and a deep understanding of their own value and worth.
I'm so inspired by this conversation. It's a reminder that we, as educators, we have this incredible opportunity to make a difference. We can help them break free from those limiting beliefs and truly unlock their potential.
It's really been great digging into this with you. We've covered so much, and I hope it's got our listeners thinking too.
Yeah, me too. I mean, we explored the whole idea of learned helplessness, those specific things autistic students face, but, the best part, those concrete things educators can actually do to change things for the better.
And it really all comes back to that core idea, learned helplessness. It's about what you go through, the environment you're in.
Yeah, yeah. And if we can change those experiences, create those supportive spaces where they feel empowered, well, then we can help students unlearn that feeling of helplessness and rediscover, like, that joy of learning.
It's not about fixing this student. It's about building the right environment so they can thrive.
Dr. Hoerricks definitely gave us a lot to chew on. And as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a question. If learned helplessness comes from our experiences and our environment, what are the little ways those patterns show up in our lives?
Ooh, that's a good one to think about. I think we've all had those moments where we just want to give up.
Hmm.
We doubt ourselves. We feel like nothing we do matters.
Totally. And sometimes those feelings come directly from the messages we get from the world around us,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
From the systems we're in, the people we're around.
It's so important like to notice those messages
Yeah.
and to challenge them, especially when they're harmful, and to build our own little pockets of support and empowerment.
Yes. And to remember that we can always choose hope over helplessness, action over apathy, and to believe in ourselves and each other. So, to all our listeners out there, keep exploring this. What really resonated with you? What will you take away from this? And most importantly, what are you going to do to make a difference in your own life and in the lives of others? We can all be those agents of change, creating spaces where everyone feels empowered to learn, grow, and thrive.